President Trump sharing in an interview that he is very angry, even pissed, with his Russian counterpart after Vladimir Putin questioned the credibility of Ukraine's Vladimir Zelensky. For more on the war on Ukraine, former CIA chief of station and Fox News contributor Dan Hoffman. Dan, this was quite strong language with President Trump clearly indicating that he's frustrated with where things stand with Putin. What's your read?
Yeah, he is absolutely frustrated. Look, President Trump has tried everything he could to entice Russia to come to the bargaining table. The president publicly stated that Ukraine would not return to their 2014 border, that they would not join NATO. We withheld military assistance and intelligence support for a period of time. Ukraine ultimately agreed to a ceasefire. Russia wouldn't do so. We were able to negotiate painstakingly many ceasefires in the Black Sea and over infrastructure, but Russia has broken those, all while receiving support from Iran, from North Korea, and from China. Just a couple days ago, Russia launched over 170 drones against Iran. So Vladimir Putin clearly has no interest in stopping the war, and that is frustrating the president, and that's why I think he came out and said what he did.
And let me show our viewers a little bit, Dan, of what he did say. He says, quote, "If Russia and I are unable to make a deal on stopping the bloodshed in Ukraine, and if I think it was Russia's fault, which it might not be, but if I think it was Russia's fault, I am going to put secondary tariffs on oil, on all oil coming out of Russia." What sort of impact would that have?
Well, it's a tough one to gauge, and I'm sure that the president will be talking to his senior advisors in the intelligence community, Secretary of Treasury and National Security Advisor, Secretary of State as well. Look, the Biden administration threatened tariffs and sanctions before the invasion, and that never deterred Putin. Since then, Putin has swiveled his economy pretty effectively to China and to India, and I just don't know whether those secondary sanctions, those tariffs, would be enough to influence Putin's calculus. Right now, there doesn't seem to be anything that will stop him from continuing the war, including the hundreds of thousands of casualties that he has suffered. That's how badly he wants to topple the government of Ukraine and install a puppet Kremlin regime. That's his strategic objective, and he's never veered from that.
Yeah, he certainly hasn't. And with your great experience and expertise, Dan, if you sort of tried to look into the crystal ball and figure out how it is that Trump ultimately gets Putin to the table, where would you look?
I'd look back to the Reagan administration. President Reagan brilliantly wove together our soft power. Remember him at the Brandenburg Gate telling Mr. Gorbachev to tear down the wall, as well as military force projection to counter and deter the Soviet Union. You got to put the bayonet at their belly and make it clear that we're going to use it to drive them to the negotiating table. President Reagan negotiated unprecedented arms control deals, the START talks, and START negotiations, all of that because of that peace through strength strategy. You've got to employ the strength part of it against Russia. That might mean giving Ukraine more weapons and making it clear that Russia is going to pay a higher price and will stand absolutely no chance of achieving that strategic objective of theirs to topple the government of Ukraine.
We'll see what comes of this. There was another piece of news in this interview, Dan, I want to ask you about, and that was President Trump basically directly threatened Iran from calling on them to stop their nuclear weapons program. He literally said if they don't make a deal, which would be to stop their nuclear weapons proliferation, then there will be bombing. And he went on also to talk about tariffs as well as part of that deal. But what is your take on that statement and really the broader issue of bringing in Iran to the front of this sort of standoff?
Well, Iran's a nuclear threshold state. They are closer now than they've ever been to having a nuclear bomb. And I think that's why the president is ringing the alarm bells and making it clear that this is a foreign policy issue that we need to solve with some alacrity. And that's why he's making this very clear statement publicly to Iran's leadership. And look, there are three concerns about Iran. It's their nuclear program, it's the ballistic missile capability which they could use to deliver nuclear weapons, and it's their support to proxy terrorists. Now, Israel has decimated Iran's terrorists, Hezbollah, Hamas, and we're doing a job on the Houthis right now. Iran's air defenses, Israel took those out months ago. So Iran is weaker now than they've ever been before, and this is a propitious time for the president to seek to strike a deal. But in order to do that, you've got to make it clear that if Iran doesn't come to the table, we will back that up with military action if needed. I think that's the same strategy we need to employ in Ukraine as well.
We'll see if they come to the table as well. Dan Hoffman, as always, thank you for your insight.
Thanks, Griff.